You think you know what love looks like. You probably picture grand gestures, big declarations, someone chasing you down the street in the rain. That's what movies taught you. But I'm about to tell you something that will completely flip the way you see relationships. And if you've ever loved someone who was distant, guarded, or hard to read, this might be the most important thing you'll ever hear. Here's the cold truth. The rarest thing an avoidant will ever do for you looks nothing like love. In fact, the first time it happens, you might not even notice it. You might brush it off. You might even feel underwhelmed. But what you just witnessed in that quiet, ordinary, almost invisible moment was something that person has probably never done for anyone, ever. And if you walk away from that without understanding what just happened, you will spend the rest of your life looking for something louder, something more obvious, something that looks more like love on the surface but means far less in reality. Stay with me, because by the time you reach the middle of this, you are going to feel something shift inside you. You're going to start replaying moments with that person, and some of those moments are going to hit very differently than they did the first time around. Now let's talk about the avoidant mind, not in a clinical textbook way, in a real, human, messy way, because understanding this person is the key to understanding why what they do for you is so much more significant than what most people will ever do. An avoidant didn't wake up one day and decide to be closed off. That's not how it works. Something happened, usually early, very early. Maybe their emotions were dismissed when they were little. Maybe they reached for comfort and got silence instead. Maybe they learned through repeated experience that needing someone is dangerous, that vulnerability gets punished, that love comes with a price you can't afford to keep paying. So they adapted. The human brain is brilliant at adapting. What the avoidant developed was a system, an internal system built to protect them from the pain of needing someone who might not be there. They learn to self-regulate, to pull back before the pull-away happens, to leave first before they can be left, to shrink their own needs so thoroughly that eventually they almost stopped feeling those needs altogether. Almost, not completely. Because here's what nobody tells you about avoidance. Underneath all of that distance, underneath all of that self-sufficiency and the walls and the independence that look so effortless on the outside, there's a person who feels deeply, maybe more deeply than most people you've ever met. They just have a completely different relationship with those feelings. They don't wear them on the surface. They carry them in places they've never shown anyone. And that's exactly why what they do for the right person is so rare, because it isn't natural for them. It doesn't come easy. Every single gesture, every single moment of openness costs them something, something real, something significant. While you might open up to someone, the way you open a window, light and easy and automatic, they open up the way someone opens a door that's been sealed shut for decades. It takes effort. It takes trust. And for an avoidant, trust is the rarest resource in the world. So when I tell you there are specific things an avoidant will do for someone they genuinely love, I need you to understand the weight of each one. I need you to understand that what looks small on the outside is huge on the inside. Let's start with the one almost everyone misses. They stay. That's it. They just stay. When things get emotionally heavy, when the conversation goes deeper than surface level, when you start talking about feelings or needs or the future, most avoidants do one thing instinctively. They leave. Not always physically. Sometimes they leave the room. Sometimes they leave emotionally. They go quiet. They change the subject. They suddenly remember something they have to do. Their whole nervous system is wired to create distance when closeness becomes too intense. But for you, they stayed. They sat in the discomfort. They didn't run. Maybe they went quiet for a moment. Maybe they looked uncomfortable. Maybe you could see the effort it was taking them not to retreat. But they stayed, and that is not a small thing. That's everything. Because you have to understand what staying costs an avoidant. Their entire psychological setup is built around one thing. Distance equals safety. So when they choose closeness over safety, when they stay in a moment that every cell in their body is telling them to escape from, that isn't just love. That's a person taking apart their own defense system piece by piece for you. And most people never get that from an avoidant. Most people get the disappearing act instead. Now let's talk about something even more subtle, something that needs your close attention, because it happens quietly and it's over before most people realize it was a gift. They remembered something small. You mentioned once, in passing, that you had a difficult relationship with your father growing up. You said it offhandedly. You didn't make a big deal of it. You moved on to something else. 3 weeks later, they bring it up. Not dramatically. They just say something like, "I was thinking about what you said about your dad. Are you okay?" Or maybe you mentioned a food you love, something obscure, something you said once without even thinking. And weeks later, without any prompting, they got it for you. Or they sent you an article about it. Or they just said they saw it somewhere and thought of you. This is huge, and here's why. Avoidants protect themselves by keeping things shallow. The more they know about you, the more attached they become. The more attached they become, the more open they are to being hurt. So the self-protective move is to not pay close attention, to not let the details of your life sink in, to stay just far enough away that losing you wouldn't be catastrophic. When they remember the small things, they're showing you that they've let you in past the first wall, that they're no longer keeping you at arm's length emotionally, that somewhere in their mind and heart, you've become someone who matters enough to think about when you're not there. That is intimacy, real intimacy, and for an avoidant, it's one of the hardest things to allow. Let's keep going, because the next one often gets misread entirely. They tell you something they've never told anyone. It might seem ordinary. They might say it in a low, flat voice with no drama attached. They might say something like, "I don't usually talk about this," and then say something that clearly carries years of weight. Maybe it's something about their childhood. Maybe it's a fear they have. Maybe it's a failure they've never admitted to. Maybe it's something they did that they're ashamed of. Maybe it's just a dream they have that they think sounds silly. And then they look at you. And in that look, even if their face is still controlled, even if their voice is still even, you can feel the question underneath it. Is it safe? Did I just make a mistake by showing you this? The average person who has never studied the avoidant attachment style might hear that moment and think, okay, that's nice. They shared something personal. But you need to understand the size of what just happened. An avoidant doesn't share vulnerably, not naturally, not without a real internal cost. Vulnerability for them isn't a practice, it's a risk that their history has told them again and again isn't worth taking. They took that risk with you. That means something deep. That means you're one of the very, very few people in their life who gets to see something real, something unguarded, something true. And if you responded with care when they did that, if you held that moment gently, if you didn't make them feel foolish or exposed or too much, they filed that away and it made it possible for the next wall to come down, however slowly. Now let's talk about something that tends to confuse a lot of people in relationships with avoidance. And it confuses them because it looks like a problem when it's actually a sign. They got uncomfortable and told you about it, not dramatically, not with a fight or an explosion. They didn't disappear for 3 days without explanation. They didn't shut down completely. They actually said something like, "I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now," or "I need some space, but I don't want you to think it's about you," or even just, "This is hard for me." Do you understand how huge that is? An avoidant's default response to emotional overwhelm is to go silent and pull away without explanation, because explaining requires vulnerability. Because saying, "I'm overwhelmed," means admitting that they have feelings, that you affect them, that they aren't as untouchable as they need the world to believe. It means dropping the mask even for a moment. When they instead tell you about that discomfort, rather than just acting it out through withdrawal, they're doing something incredibly hard. They're trying. They're trying to do the relationship differently than their instincts are telling them to. They're choosing communication over escape, and that choice isn't available to most avoidants with most people. The fact that they're doing it with you means something. Here's another one that's almost always missed. They showed up when you needed them, even when it was inconvenient. Avoidants aren't great with other people's emotional needs, not because they don't care, but because emotional need triggers something in them. It creates a pressure they aren't comfortable with. When someone is sad or scared or falling apart, the avoidant instinct is usually to offer a solution, or change the subject, or simply disappear until the storm passes. Getting too close to someone else's pain feels threatening. It requires emotional presence, and emotional presence is the thing they've spent a lifetime guarding against. So when you called them crying, and they stayed on the phone, when you were sick, and they came over even though they had other plans, when you were having the worst day of your life, and they set aside whatever armor they normally wear and just sat with you in it, don't file that under ordinary. There is nothing ordinary about that. That required them to override their most deeply built-in protective responses. It required them to tolerate their own discomfort in order to prioritize yours. That's a choice they make on purpose, even if it looks effortless from the outside, because nothing about it is effortless for them. And the next one is very specific to avoidance, and it's something you might have noticed without realizing what it meant. They initiated, they reached out first, they texted first, they made the plan. They said, "Let's do this, let's go there, let's spend time together." Without you prompting it, without you making it obvious you wanted it. They just reached out because they wanted to. For the anxiously attached person, or even the securely attached person, initiating feels natural. You feel something, you act on it. You miss someone, you text them. For the avoidant, initiating is an admission. It's an admission that they want something from you, that they need connection with you, that you aren't interchangeable, that losing you would matter. And every one of those admissions makes them vulnerable in ways that feel genuinely dangerous to their system. So they hold back, they wait, they tell themselves they're just giving you space. But what they're really doing is protecting themselves from the risk of reaching out and being rejected, or worse, being absorbed. Because intimacy for an avoidant is both what they want and what they fear most in the world. When they initiate, they're choosing desire over fear. They're saying, "Even though this scares me, I want to be close to you more than I want to stay safe." That is not nothing. That is the whole thing. Let's go a little deeper now because I want to talk about something that happens in fights, in conflicts, in the moments where relationships are really tested. They came back to the conversation. When conflict happens, avoidants classically do one thing. They shut down. They go quiet. They need to get away from the emotional intensity, and they often have no idea when or if they're coming back. Some people wait days for a response that never comes. Some people watch the avoidant in their life turn a moment of connection into a week of cold silence with no explanation. But for you, they came back. Maybe it took a while. Maybe they needed some time to regulate. But they came back and said something like, "I've been thinking about what happened," or "I handled that badly," or even just, "Can we talk about this?" An avoidant returning to repair a rupture is extremely rare because returning means engaging again with the thing that was emotionally overwhelming in the first place. It means risking another round of feelings they don't know how to sit with. It means admitting that the relationship matters enough to fix. And all of those things together represent a level of emotional courage that most avoidants have never shown anyone. If they do that with you, if they come back and try to repair, you are witnessing something almost no one in their life has ever seen. Now I want to talk about something that lives in the quietest part of this whole dynamic, something that doesn't look like love until you understand the language it's being spoken in. They made future plans with you, small ones, nothing that had to be big. Maybe they said, "We should go there sometime." Maybe they mentioned something a few months out and naturally included you in it. Maybe they said, "When we do this together," thinking ahead to a time that assumed you'd still be there. The avoidant mind lives in the present partly because the present is safe. The future requires commitment. The future requires believing the relationship will still exist, still be wanted, still be worth investing in. And betting on the future means betting on someone else. It means allowing hope. And hope, for someone who's been let down enough times, is one of the scariest things in the world. When an avoidant starts including you in their future, even casually, even in small ways, they're doing something internally huge. They're letting you exist in their mind beyond right now. They're allowing themselves to want more time with you. And that level of openness about wanting is something their system has spent years trying to shut off. Hold on to that, because it's a gift, even when it sounds ordinary. Let's talk about something else that often goes unrecognized. They defended you, not necessarily in a loud or dramatic way. Maybe someone said something unkind about you, and they said, "No, that's not true." Or maybe they spoke up for you in a situation where staying quiet would have been easier. Or maybe they just made it clear to someone in their world that you matter to them, that you aren't just someone they're seeing, that your name carries weight. Avoidants are usually very careful about what they reveal about their feelings, about their relationships, about what they care about, because revealing what you care about gives people leverage, and giving people leverage is one of the most threatening things an avoidant can imagine. If people know what you love, they know where to hurt you. So when they claim you, when they stand up for you, when they make your value to them visible in any way, they're taking a real risk. They're saying, "This person is mine to protect, and I'm willing to be seen saying so." That's a huge act of trust, not just in you, but in the relationship itself. And this next one might be the most profound of all, because it's the one most people overlook completely. They let you see them struggle, not the polished version, not the competent, self-sufficient, everything is fine version they show the world, the real one, the one that didn't know how to handle something, the one that felt lost, the one that had a hard day, and for once didn't pretend it was fine. Maybe they said, "I don't know what to do." Maybe they just seemed sad, and for the first time they didn't immediately put the mask back on. Maybe they said, "I'm not okay right now," and let you see that without immediately shutting it back down. For an avoidant, appearing weak or uncertain is one of the most threatening experiences possible because their entire identity is built around not needing anyone, around being capable and independent and immune to the emotional chaos that seems to bring other people to their knees. That image isn't vanity, it's armor. It's the thing standing between them and the vulnerability that once got them hurt. So when they lay that armor down, even briefly, even imperfectly, and let you see what's underneath it, you're seeing the truest version of them, the version that exists before all the protection goes up. The version they've probably spent decades keeping hidden, and they showed it to you on purpose. Or maybe not even on purpose, which is even more meaningful, because it means they felt safe enough with you that the armor slipped without them planning it. That's love in the avoidant language, and it's the rarest sentence in their vocabulary. Now, I want to be honest with you about something because this wouldn't be complete without it. Understanding all of this doesn't mean accepting everything. It doesn't mean excusing the disappearances or the shutdowns or the moments where they went cold when you needed them to be warm. Loving an avoidant doesn't require becoming a saint. It requires clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from understanding what's actually happening beneath the surface of the behavior that confuses or hurts you. When they pulled away after getting close, it wasn't rejection. It was fear. When they went quiet after a good date, it wasn't indifference. It was overwhelm. When they seemed to push you away right when things were getting real, it wasn't because you were too much. It was because they were feeling too much and they didn't know how to hold it without shutting down. None of that means you should tolerate being treated poorly. None of that means you should make yourself small to accommodate their fear. What it means is that you now have the ability to see the difference between someone who is unable to love and someone who is doing the hard, terrifying, slow work of learning to love in a way they were never taught. And that's a crucial distinction because giving up on the first is wisdom. But walking away from the second without recognizing what you had, that's a loss you might not fully understand until much later. There are people walking around right now who let go of someone who was doing all of these things, who was staying even though every part of them wanted to flee, who was remembering the small details even though closeness scared them, who was initiating even though vulnerability terrified them, who was coming back to repair even though returning to conflict felt unbearable, who was letting their armor slip even though exposure felt like the most dangerous thing they'd ever done. And those people thought they were being overlooked. They thought they deserved more. And maybe in some ways they were right. But they didn't recognize what they had. They didn't know the language it was being spoken in. You know it now. So here's the question that matters, and I want you to sit with it for a moment before you answer. Is there someone in your life who's been doing these things quietly, who's been staying even when staying was hard, who has been showing up in ways that look small, but now, through everything you've just heard, look huge? Who has been speaking in a language you weren't quite fluent in before today? If there is, you now have a choice that you didn't have before. The choice to recognize what you're being given. The choice to meet that person with the same patience and presence they've been extending to you in the only way they know how. The choice to stop waiting for the grand gesture and start receiving the quiet, costly, extraordinarily rare thing that's actually being offered. Because here's the final truth, and this is the one that stays with you. People love in the language they were given, and some people were given a very limited vocabulary for it, but they're using every word they have, every single one, for you. And if you can hear that, if you can really hear it, that changes everything. You've been carrying a question about someone, about whether they really love you, about whether it's real, about whether what you're experiencing is enough. And I hope something in this shifted the way you hold that question, not by lowering your standards, but by expanding your understanding of what love can look like when it comes from someone who learned very early that love wasn't safe. The rarest thing an avoidant will ever do for you is choose you over their own fear, over and over again, in ways so quiet you almost didn't see them. But they were there. They have always been there. And now you can see them for what they are. Don't let that person go without understanding what they were giving you. Don't let the silence fool you into thinking nothing was being said. And don't let the ordinary moments pass without recognizing the extraordinary courage it took for them to show up in them. Because for someone who learned that love was dangerous, reaching for it anyway is the bravest thing in the world. And if they are reaching for you, that means something deep and rare and worth understanding, worth choosing, worth staying for. If you are someone who has felt this way, who has loved someone quiet and guarded and difficult to read, share this with them. Not as a message, not as a hint, just share it, because sometimes people don't know they're being seen until someone shows them the mirror. And if this opens something up for you today, if it made you see someone differently, if it made you see yourself differently, you already know what to do. Stay curious about the people who are hard to read. They usually have the most to say.